Hello everyone and welcome to my second Malazan video. First off, thank you to anyone who watched my first video. I really appreciate all the views, likes, comments, and I've had a few subscribers so far, so thanks very much for that. It's really good to be able to communicate with other fans of the series. So in this video today I'm going to be ranking the main 10 books in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Little disclaimer before I start. This order's only my opinion, so, there's no right or wrong answers here. Each book's going to affect people differently. It's probably also worth knowing that I'm currently on my first reread, just finishing up Deadhouse Gates. So as I continue with that, this order could potentially change. Anyway, let's get into it. I'm going to keep each of these quite short, so starting at number 10, it's Dust of Dreams. Unfortunately for me, this book was the weakest in the series as I found it pretty messy and confusing the first time through. That could of course change when I reread, but for now it's my least favourite. I feel like this book seemed to be the least structured as well. There was far too many sort of POV jumps in each chapter, which made it extremely difficult to follow. I understand it was written as the first half of the final book, but I just think the Crip of God is a much easier and sort of more structured read. In at number 9 is The Bone Hunters. Praised by a lot of people as the best book in the series. After my first read, I felt like this book needed some serious editing. I have got no issue whatsoever with the length of these books, but this one felt genuinely like it was too long. And it did feel like a bit of a chore to get through, unfortunately. There are some, shall we say, spicy parts in this book. Obviously everything to do with Yagatan. That reminds me actually, I need to go out and buy some olive oil. Yeah, boy. Up next at number 8 is Reaper's Gale, which is the sequel to Midnight Tides. I feel like Red Mask was a bit of a dud in this book. Didn't really enjoy reading his passages about him or the owl, I'm not too sure how you pronounce that. But I am always down for reading some Kachain Jamal action, so that sort of helped out. Overall, I did feel it was a good sequel to Midnight Tides. We see Rulad Sengar's descent into madness. We get to follow Casa Orlong and Akarium as they travel to kill him. The book also has Silchus Ruin, which is one of my favourite characters in the series and possibly one of the most intriguing and interesting characters. So yeah, that one comes in for me at number 8. In at number 7 is House of Chains. Now, despite the low ranking, I actually really enjoyed this book. I just think the ones I'm going to mention afterwards were better, which is often the case in this series. I thought that following one point of view character for nearly a quarter of the entire book was a genius move by Erikson. Obviously, we all know he did that due to some criticism that people said he couldn't stick to one character for a decent length of time. He obviously proved them wrong. I think Casa Orlong and the culture he comes from is fascinating. House of Chains is, of course, the sequel to Deadhouse Gates and deals with the aftermath of the Chain of Dogs storyline and also the fending off of Shaik, the Whirlwind Goddess. I thought the ending to Shaik's story was quite shocking, but also a bit of a masterful move from Erikson, having her sister kill her without even knowing who she was. One of the most badass moments of the series also happens in this book, when Casa Orlong rips off Bidethol's cock and balls and proceeds to stuff them down the child-mutilating bastard's throat. Fuck Bidethol, that needs to be said. Midnight Tides comes in at number 6. This is the book that I always see coming in sort of number 1 on people's lists. It is a great book that introduced us to the continent of Letha and a whole new cast of characters once again. We are introduced to the Taist Edur and to memorable characters like Rulad and Troll Sengar, Tehol and Barg, and an albino Taist Andi Soul Taken named Silchus Ruin, and many more. It's a fantastic book and really shows how Erikson can come up with a brand new cast of characters but still sort of make them all feel important to the overall story. It's a bit low down on my list because I did find the new cast a little jarring the first time. But overall, I think the continent of Letha is so interesting, and thinking back on it, it is kind of a breath of fresh air. In at number 5 is a strange one for me. Originally, this book would have been in the bottom 2, but after rereading most of it, my mind has pretty much changed completely. That book is Dead House Gates. I know, Dead House Gates is one of the best in the series. You're screaming at me right now. During my first read through, it just felt so different to the first book that I kind of lost interest. Now that I've read all 10 books and come back to this one, it's hitting differently. The struggles of Coltane and the refugees is an exhilarating read, and we're introduced to some amazing new characters, such as the Jagger Icarium, the Mad High Priest of Shadow Escarl Pust, Coltane, the Fist of the Seventh Army, and I'm also going to mention Heberic, who becomes extremely important at the end of the series. Overall, Dead House Gates was extremely focused, tight, and well written, and deserves all the praise that it gets. Number 4 is Gardens of the Moon, the book that started it all. Gardens of the Moon above Dead House Gates, you say? Well, yeah. Gardens of the Moon kick-started my love for this series, and I still think it's a fantastic book, albeit the other books in the series have a lot better writing. Gardens was a ballsy book from Erikson which clearly paid off, and allowed him to sign a 10-book contract for the rest of the series. We're introduced to some of the best characters in the entire series in this book. I was pretty much hooked from the beginning, and this book contained everything I want to read about in fantasy. I mean, who isn't hooked after reading about Moonspawn, right? Number 3 is The Crip of God. This book was something of a masterpiece in my opinion, and it's extremely hard to choose between this and my number 2 position, but for now I'm going to leave it where it is. This book was honestly phenomenal from start to finish. After the messy and sort of confusing Dust of Dreams, I think Erikson really brought it home for the finale. The book is completely action-packed, has some of my favourite scenes from the series in it, such as the battle at Lightfall, Cotillion freeing the crippled god so he can return to his followers, the battle at the Spire for the crippled god's heart, all the battles with the Forkful Sail. Hey, remember when Hood bit someone's face off? Yeah, I do. This book is a mind-blowing and, dare I say, life-changing ending to this series, and it really hammers home that theme of compassion that Erikson's wove throughout this series. I've seen a lot of people say that this series changed their life and made them a better person, and I guess I can kind of agree with that. My second favourite in the series is the controversial Toll the Hounds. Erikson's father passed away during the writing of this book, and a lot of readers have pointed out that it shows in the writing. This book seems to have a kind of 50-50 split of people who love it and people who hate it. In my opinion, I think this is probably one of the most focused books in the series, and I got the impression that Erikson really knew exactly where he was going with this one. There's an absolute shit ton of narration by our little round man Crip, who we all know and love. Toll the Hounds focuses heavily on Animander Rake and Atai Standi. We follow a small group of them for quite a good portion of this book. I don't think I felt bored once reading Toll the Hounds, and I think the ending climax is genuinely one of the most mind-blowing things I've ever read. The sheer scale and imagination of Erikson is unrivaled, as he writes about Dragnapure and Chaos and Animander Rake and all the bodies and the cart full of the dead. It's just unbelievable, and it's one of those things that will stick with me forever. I really think Toll the Hounds is a masterpiece. Which leaves my number 1 spot as, you probably guessed it, Memories of Ice. Back when I first started this series, I think it might have been about 4 years ago now, I was unsure whether to carry on after Dead House Gates. I think I posted something on Reddit and someone told me to at least read through Memories of Ice and then make my mind up. I read it. Boy, did I read it. I absolutely flew through this book. There was never ever a dull moment, and I think it was probably the quickest I've ever read a book in my life. The battles were epic and on such an unbelievable, huge scale. We're introduced to the legendary shield anvil Ikovian, Gruntle, who ended up becoming the mortal sword of Trake, Borchelane and Corbel Broach, who ended up with their own spin-off series, and so many other characters that I won't even be able to list them all here. In my mind, this book is probably the greatest piece of fantasy ever written. It features dark and memorable places, characters, set pieces, you name it, this book's got it. It would be extremely, extremely hard for anyone to top this book in action or scope. In fact, I don't even think it's possible to do. Erikson sat down and he wrote a nearly 1,200 page masterpiece for the ages, and one that needs to be read by anyone interested in this series. This is the book you at least try to get to and read before deciding if this series is for you. I literally cannot praise Memories of Ice enough. So that's my top 10. I didn't want to say too much about each book, as the video is more about the order of the books and the content itself. Really what I wanted to do was kind of start off a bit of a back and forth, and I would be interested to hear what your rankings of the books are, and whether it's at all similar to mine. It might be, it might not be, who knows. Again, there's no right or wrong answers here, so please feel free to comment your rankings below. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you.